welcome back to Real Girl Talk Podcast Radio. I am your host, Sherry Ricard. I'm an author, speaker, business leader, and adversity recovery expert, bringing you inspiring guests, business, and lifestyle tips to help you create a beautiful life, and always committed to keeping it real. Now let's dive in. Today's episode is sponsored by Richer Pour, a men's and women's basics brand where comfort equals confidence. A balance of the coziest fabrics with forward-thinking designs to deliver you the best of both worlds. They are committed to creating essential pieces that transcend seasons to be on you on the daily. You can use discount code RealGirlTalk through May 31st for 25% off at www.richer-pour.com. Welcome back to Real Girl Talk. Thank you so much for honoring me with your presence today because I have an amazing show with Iva Pawling. She is a co-founder and CEO of Richer Pour, a men's and women's elevated basics brand founded in 2010. Eva was lucky to start her career in the PR closet of Kate Spade in 2003, and now Richer Pour works with over 1,000 retailers globally. Welcome to Real Girl Talk, Eva.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining me. So Eva and I are chatting from our homes in this pandemic quarantine right now.
Bedroom. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm
behind me.
I'm hoping to. Oh, I see all the stuffed animals in the background. Yep. That's too cute. I'm hoping that by the time this airs, we are out of our quarantine state and back out into the real world. So I really appreciate you joining me today. And I want to talk a little bit about Kate Spade. Let's kind of start there. So tell us a little bit about your start with Kate Spade in 2003.
So I graduated from college. I went to school in Arizona. I went to Arizona State and had decided to move to New York City immediately after graduating with a communications degree and had no idea what I was going to do. I had always been obsessed with clothing and fashion and knew that there was a real interest there. But the idea of like breaking into the fashion industry in New York was fairly overwhelming. And so I had actually gone to high school with Kate Spade's niece. And we were friendly. And so I had called her actually the day that I was flying to New York to move and just asked her if she had an HR contact. She had put me in touch with somebody there. I think it was like 3 days into living in New York. I interviewed with them, got the job the next week and was off to the races there. So it was such a fantastic opportunity. This was obviously ages ago now at this point, but in 2003, they had a program for just graduated college students. So you came in and half of the day, which is challenge of all challenges when you've never answered phones for 100 people. And then the second half of the day, for probably 3 months, they had you bounce around for 2 weeks from department to department to really understand how the entire ecosystem worked of the company and, essentially a brand, which was all totally foreign and new to me. And so I had kind of, after bouncing around, loved PR and ended up there.
When you started your startup, where did you get the idea to do your startup?
So I had, so after I left Kate Spade, I stayed in PR for a little bit. My sister has a jewelry brand called Goriana that is pretty well known. They've got about 18 stores across the country. And so she had just started her brand. They've been around for about 15, 16 years. And so I went to work with them on that for about 3 to 4 years. And my brother-in-law and my sister run it together. And I loved the startup world so much of getting a brand off the ground and kind of those first years experience. But I couldn't really scratch this itch of wanting to do it myself. I had stepped in to help them with their business probably 3 years after they had started it. And there was just something that was kind of clawing at me about still wanting to start something from scratch. And so my business partner, Tim, I had met when I moved to California, and he had the idea of starting a men's sock company. It was like, he's one of those guys that just has 1,000 ideas. And I actually really gravitated towards it because, coming from the jewelry space, there's so much competition. There's so many brands, and we would show up to trade shows. And was really appealing to me. Yeah, we'd show up to trade shows for the jewelry. And it was such a stressful experience to walk and see hundreds and hundreds of vendors, doing something very similar to what you're doing. And so the idea of men's socks was so appealing to me because at the time, this was in 2010, there was really nobody doing it in the way that we wanted to. And so able to, have a brand and have a product that there wasn't a ton of.
How did you start with that? I mean, I'm trying to think of how you're going to get into all of these retailers. Where did you
Yeah.
start? What was the retailer like? There's got to be a crazy story here, because selling socks to a major retailer has got to have its challenges.
Oh, yeah. I think that this is, I think a lot of people tell you with entrepreneurship that, not knowing is a really big blessing in the process, because if you had any idea what you were stepping into and the challenges that were going to come your way, you would never in a million years do it. So when we started looking at socks, it was an interesting category because like everyone knows you buy socks, but the idea of branded socks that were kind of like buying per pair, fairly new thing. It was something that everyone, in the men's dress space had existed for many years, right? Like,
right.
The guy that buys a nice suit is used to spending $30 on a pair of socks, but the rest of the world was not. We were at the time, like everyone was still buying their socks in packs at like Costco or Target or, wherever they could. So sock manufacturing was one difficulty and hurdle we had to get over because it actually wasn't done domestically really anymore. We were trying to produce in the US and that wasn't a thing. And then we found, luckily we're in Southern California where there's a ton of other brands that are around us. And so one of my neighbors happened to have a sock vendor for a brand that he worked for. And so he passed along their contact info. And we just asked a lot of questions. I mean, that's, I think the one of the best pieces of advice I can give to people, when they're just starting out is ask a ton of questions from everybody. Because people want to help. They want to give you the right answer. They want to be kind of a part of your journey and help you along the way. And I think, specifically for females, there's so much like of this place of fear that we live in that we should already have the answer and know these things.
Yeah.
And the sooner that you can kind of get over that and just get used to asking questions, and just being inquisitive, that the faster you can usually kind of get on your way.
I know, because you and I had talked about that before, about mentorship and how important it is to have good mentors.
No question.
So for somebody that's just starting out and they're thinking, I don't know anyone, I don't know anyone in this space. I don't know where to start. I have a brand. I have some ideas. How do they put them into action? How would you suggest they start?
So a few things. The one part of it is actually mentors, the people that have already done it, right? That have already kind of been down that path, and they kind of can help you avoid some of the potholes and kind of direct you. And I would say from that point of view, there are plenty of people that, just like myself, that have kind of been lifted up and gone through this process with the help of a lot of others, and everyone wants to pay it forward. So just simply ask, like reach out to people's DMs through Instagram, whatever it is, just like, hey, I am starting a new brand. I have a question. Do you by chance have a few minutes, or can you answer this one question for me, or any of those things? I think like the same point of just ask, like simply, you may get 25 no's from people or just no responses. But if you get one person to respond and that they're willing to kind of get on the phone with you for 15 minutes, you can usually end up with a few little nuggets of information that can be incredibly helpful. And then on the other side of that, brands and companies right now, because of technology and because of the way that we purchase and the way that we grow businesses now, are moving so rapidly that even, I started a company in 2010. Instagram didn't exist at the time. So how I started it isn't even relevant anymore, right, to somebody else that's starting now. So One of the pieces of advice I love to give is find people that are in the same stage as you and are also having to kind of scrap through it and figure it out, because those are the people that are going to have, the best ability to tell you what's working for them today. If you're a brand that has a small following, find other brands that have small followings and reach out to founders, and chances are you're both experiencing probably really similar things and can kind of help each other out.
I love that, Eva, because one thing that I talk about all the time is if you're a woman that has reached that level of success like you have, and I've met so many women that have, it's so important to give back to another woman, not necessarily a younger woman, because, we have women now that are starting over in their 40s and 50s, and just starting their brands. I told you I started Real Girl Talk a year and a half. And what I did was exactly what you said. I reached out to those that have already paved the way. And for every no, I actually got 3 yeses in talking to me because I happened to reach out to those women that were willing to give me advice, even if it was
And
15 or
there's
20
so many.
minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many people that are willing to. And like, I think that that's where like human nature is actually to help. I don't think it's to kind of, you know, amass our own things and go in our own direction and not want to talk to anybody or share. So I think that
No. Yeah, I
so many more
totally
people are
agree.
willing to.
We have to share. I mean, especially with women that are growing in different companies and different levels in their life and what they're doing. And a lot of women that listen to this show are very interested in lifestyle and business and community and
Yeah.
family. And a lot of them were trying to reboot and reinvent themselves in different avenues and, areas of their life. And when you started this company, the one thing that you did was after you got going, you sold it. So
Yeah,
you
we
sold
did.
it and rebought it. So what made you sell this company that was growing?
Yes. I know it was a very crazy time. So we started the company at the end of 2000 and in 2015 we had decided that we really wanted to do a like fairly substantial fundraising round to bring in some equity partners, and we had wanted to spend all this money on marketing. We didn't have the budget to do it, so we were looking at bringing on investors, and we had been introduced to this group that quickly just made us an offer to actually acquire the business. And it was not something we were interested in at the time, but they were a much larger company. They were an e-commerce business. We wanted to learn more about e-commerce and figure out how we ourselves could kind of step into that space in a larger way.
Uh-huh.
And we knew that that skill set didn't really exist in-house in the team that we had. And so we sold it. I mean, they made us an incredible offer. When you start a brand, you usually have the intent that at some point you'll be able to kind of go through that acquisition process, or at least that's the dream. And so with that offer on the table, we just took it. I mean, it was a very hard thing to say no to, and it was a very hard thing to say yes to, but we did it. And then the partnership did not go as planned, and had the opportunity a few years later to end up buying the business back. So we stayed on the whole time. We never had the intent of leaving the business. We just really wanted to grow the company with a bigger and better team, essentially, and kind of keep moving forward. So luckily, we were still on board, and we were still running and operating the company, and so we were able to purchase it back in 2018.
So you bought it back in 2018, and shortly after that, they went bankrupt.
No, so we actually it's a very complicated story,
Yeah.
but we bought it with investors exactly a year later, which the investors actually bought it back. We were just part of the deal. And the parent company did file bankruptcy a month later. So that was like a giant, like, hallelujah, we got out in the nick of time. And then we ended up running it with them for another year and a half. And then we purchased it back ourselves. So the whole like start to finish was about 2 something years of like losing full control, running it with other people, and then pulling it completely back.
Wow.
But yeah, it was insane. I mean, I could spend 3 hours on the experience of those 2.5 years. But I think that what the most interesting part of that, when we sold the stock business, and in that 2.5 year stretch, we had grown so much and had developed new products. And we had this kind of breakout product of the women's bralette.
Yeah.
That was kind of when bralettes started to hit, and we made an incredibly soft one that was made out of modal, and it was priced really well, at right around $30. And so that just kind of caught fire, and we had an easy wait list for it. And so then that took us into some other categories for women. So what we sold was a men's sock business, and what we bought back was essentially a women's apparel business, which is what we are today.
Before you sold it, how many retailers about were you in then compared to now?
So I think I want to say we were probably around 300-400 retailers at the time when we sold it.
Where are you
Yeah,
now?
we're in about 1,000 retailers now. And we really have been more focused on the e-commerce business of growing that direct to consumer business ourselves and kind of building that relationship directly with that customer. Obviously, in the world of the last month and what's happened to retailers in the market, our anticipation is probably 30 to 40% of our wholesale business will probably drop off entirely for this year. So the last month has been spent just completely replanning everything that we're doing and kind of how we're moving forward, because what we thought was going to be a crazy growth year for wholesale and with the retail side of the business and the stores that we're in, we'll be lucky to be able to hit last year's numbers now. But now e-commerce for us has really kind of taken off because luckily we sell comfortable clothes, and in a pandemic when people are at home, they want comfortable clothes.
Yeah. And don't you think that a lot of the retail is just going towards online?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we've been seeing that trend for the last decade. Slowly every single year you see more and more of retail sales moving to direct to consumer. And, I think that it no question will continue to go this direction. Fast forward it, obviously, none of us want to really go into any crowded places, even once all of the orders lift and we're allowed to go back into the real world. I think that there's going to be some very PTSD moments for all of us where being in crowded places and malls and shopping centers is probably going to be difficult. So I think it will continue to fast forward. But I do think that there's a future where, retail will come back. And I think people still like to connect and they still like to touch and feel product in stores. I don't think retail will ever go away. It'll just definitely transition.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because I find myself sometimes ordering online and you get it and I'm like, that is not what it looked like in the picture, or it doesn't fit good, or it doesn't feel good. And
Yeah.
I got something the other day that I ordered, and I got it in, and online it looked fabulous. And then I get it in and it's completely see-through. And I thought, I can't wear this.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think and the process of mailing stuff back kind of sucks still.
It really does, because then you have, I would actually have a little pile on a separate desk that I would pile up the returns, and then the ones that I want to keep. And I'm like,
exactly. And torture you on a daily basis of like what you have to get out. So
right.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I think that retail will come back and there will be some balance, but as a brand, we're certainly working towards delivering the best user experience possible, from the time people land on our website to having the opposite experience of what you just described. And when they open the package from us, that they, open their products and put them on and actually have the opposite, reaction and think, I can't believe that this was only $40 and it fits so well and the product quality is so good. So.
That's good. So you take pride in the quality of your work. And so
my goodness.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, when, we're just going to talk to the average woman that is thinking about starting some type of product line and she wants to sell it to retailers. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for her?
So I think that the world of selling to retailers that's going to be, I think, where we have the biggest shift in how we do business over the course of the next few years. To be totally transparent, the last decade post the last recession in 2008, what that's really caused is a really unbalanced relationship between the brands and the retailers. So essentially, we as brands have been the ones that are held accountable for everything inside that retail environment. So when we sell product to Bloomingdale's or Nordstrom's or any of those people, they make you actually give them a margin guarantee, which means that if your product doesn't sell through at a certain rate and at the full price, that you then essentially owe them back dollars to make up that difference. And at the end of the season, that there are times that if the product doesn't move, that they have the right to just return it to you and not pay you for it. So we as brands have to take on all of that risk, right? And then have retailers just be able, and by no means is their business model easy or anything to run. And I don't mean to say that it is, but as brands, it's been really difficult to run. We have taken on all the risk for a lot of years, and, seeing in this post-COVID environment and how many of those retailers are just straight up canceling POs and leaving us as brand owners with inventory that is now not purchased, that I think that's going to shift. So working with retailers, you have to be really, really careful. And it's kind of like a watch what you wish for. There's very much the belief of, if I've made it into these major retailers, then we've made it as a brand. But it's actually the sell-through that is what you have to be worried about, and really connecting to that customer and making sure that they are buying the product and keeping the product and buying more of that product. So the sooner you can build a relationship for whatever product it is that you want to sell with that end user and that end consumer, and understand what they like about it, what they don't like about it, what's going to make them come back, is the price in the right place, is the quality where it needs to be, all of those things, the easier time you're going to have once you do have the opportunity to sell to a retailer or any of those things. So I always tell people, get your product into people's hands as quickly as you can. Even if that means that your first production run of whatever that is, you only order 100 units and you sell it to people for the same price that you bought it for, just to be able to get the feedback to actually understand what's working and what's not. I have this little story. When we first launched our very first delivery, we sold to Nordstrom's, and it was men's socks. And we had created our own packaging because we wanted to be clever and do something different in the market. And the packaging that we created did not hold up in retail. It simply just broke down and you could not use it properly. And it looked horrible after being on the peg for like a week. And that was one of those things that, we so badly just had to get in the major retailer to start. And we're so excited about it. But in hindsight, like, had we just worked with smaller retailers and taken our time to actually figure out what was going to work in that environment and what wasn't, we would have been able to catch those things and not had the disaster that ended up, happening with that. So, I think we are living in an environment where we're constantly watching what other people are doing and have these big dreams and want to get to them as quickly as possible. But that, like, slow and steady is really the way to go.
I totally agree with you. And you hit on something because you were so quick with it that a lot of times, like I told you, when Real Girl Talk started, it was a Facebook Live. I had no idea anyone would even want to hear anything that I had to say. And when I started the Facebook Live and we were getting thousands and thousands of views, I thought, well, somebody's listening to me.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so, it was almost like a trial run. Like you said, it was like I did my little research there and I thought, okay. And so I committed to starting Real Girl Talk podcast. And as it grew, the more that it grew, the more guests that I was able to book for the show.
Of course, exactly.
And the better the guest and the more successful they are, the bigger the success of the show. And then it was like, and it wasn't until a month ago that we actually started doing sponsors. So at the beginning of the show, we do a sponsor. So I do a personal ad for those that are on my show that want to actually have discount codes for my listeners. And it's just kind of snowballed. So I love the fact that you talked about not rushing it to the finish line. And then what happens is if it's not successful by rushing it through, a lot of people will just throw in the towel and they're just, they'll quit because they didn't do their due diligence and do the research that they needed.
Yeah,
so I'm glad you said that.
It's so much of like our nature is to want to like get to that finish line as quickly as possible. And it rarely actually works in your favor to do so.
I 100% agree because there have been some things that I've rushed to the finish line that I've had to recall back because I should have put more effort and more research in what I was doing. And it makes sense about the wholesale because even in books, when I had different distributors that wanted to pick up my book, some of the criteria that they put out was crazy because they want to buy your book. And if the book doesn't sell, not only do you have to buy the book back, I have to pay for all the shipping. And I was like, wait a minute, it's easier just to put it on Amazon.
Exactly. It's so true. And that's what, like, looking from the world of Instagram and social media and, even articles that are written by media, that what you see as a customer as like that perceived story of what things look like is rarely what's actually going on behind the scenes.
I know. And there's a lot of hustle going on behind the scenes. And then you have to think about real life because at some point you had a newborn baby and everything that you were doing. So tell us how that played out.
So I have 2 kids. I have a 2-year-old and an almost 7-year-old. So, when I had my son, we were 2 years into the company and, it was rather like, I knew that I wanted kids. I waited until it was kind of a good enough time. And the only thing I will say with being an entrepreneur and having kids is that like, you don't get a maternity leave. Like I was out of the office for 6 days. I was literally on my emails. I think like sending wire transfers to our vendors the night I had my son. Like there is no break.
Wow.
Which is kind of a double-edged sword. I think that it's obviously stressful, but at the same time, I think the transition to motherhood is so jarring, especially for like when you're used to working all day, that I actually really appreciated still being able to be on my email a few hours a day when I had him, that it made me kind of connect back to what was me and not that I had like transformed into this person that was just mom now and was just accountable to another human. But when I had my daughter, we had just kicked off conversations to buy the business back from those investors literally 2 weeks before I had her. And so I had just asked them, like, can we please put this conversation on hold? I'm like already having contractions and 3 centimeters methylation.
You're causing me to have contractions.
Exactly. So I was like, I really need to kind of put that to the side, put this to the side until I can get her here and kind of settle back down. But I think that in the anyone that's become a mom, I think understands that in the first stage of motherhood, like you kind of don't care about anything else. Like it very much kind of resets your what's important and what isn't values, which it was such a, like in the moment, I was like, I cannot believe I have to negotiate this purchase back of this business while I have a 2-week-old and am breastfeeding every 3 hours. But looking back on it, it made me so bold in the negotiation because I was literally at a place of like, F it, I don't care what happens. Here's what I want and here are my terms. And if that doesn't work, then fine.
Exactly.
So I think that it was kind of both of those things, but I think parenting and motherhood and entrepreneurship are so similar. I mean, so similar that when you have a business and you're growing it, it's the second you think you have a handle on it, it changes and something, it's kind of a game of whack-a-mole, and parenting is the exact same thing. Like
that's so funny you said that because I describe my life as a whack-a-mole game all the time.
100%. And I think that the world of parenting and motherhood and career and entrepreneurship is kind of this thing that has always had to sit like kind of separately, that we try and bifurcate and live in separate worlds. And in order for people to take us seriously career-wise, we try to not talk about our kids and not talk about the softer side of motherhood and all of those things. And conversely, with our kids, we try and soften ourselves and like not be so like the project manager and all of these things as an entrepreneur. And one of the things I have loved about the experience of, quarantining and our entire teams having to be at home and conference calls at home and me sitting in my son's room with stuffed animals behind me is I feel like finally the world of parenting and business have had to merge because we're all working from home. And so, the kids running into conference calls and the acceptance of just like you are both at the same time finally feels like it's kind of come to a head. And that's the one piece of this that I really hope doesn't leave us, that we don't feel like we have to kind of go back to living in separate worlds and only at these times can you be this person, and conversely.
Well, it's reality. I mean, it's
completely.
This is our life. I mean, a lot of times people in the business world they don't see our reality as women and moms and everything that we juggle on a daily. And this is just it's reality. And it actually shows how much strength we actually have. If your kids are in the background playing while you're trying to do Zoom, if you're running a multi-million-dollar company that you started, I'm more impressed with that than watching you walk into a corporate office in a suit. Because
I totally agree.
I don't even know what you did prior to that. My illusion may be that you have nothing but this company. But when I see you in this atmosphere, you have a lot more than
completely. And I think it's, I think that this, this home life thing has added so much depth to all of us. And I really hope that we hold on to that once everything kind of lifts and we go back to some new normal. So
what do you think has contributed to your success? Because your success is huge.
I will say that it doesn't feel that way. I don't think you ever, like, no matter how like successul you are perceived to be, it never, like, it still makes me cringe inside to hear somebody say that, even though yes, I appreciate it. And, I can logically look at it and understand what it looks like. It just never feels that way. I think that when you, I think first of all, as females, I think we really live with imposter syndrome to like the nth degree. And then on top of that, I think no matter what you're doing, you constantly are moving the goalposts for yourself. So even if, I had reached the success that I had envisioned when we started the company, every 6 months I move what that is. And the second we get to it, it's very hard to stay in that, like, okay, we made it, we did it, I've accomplished what I want to. You've always created kind of more and more goals for yourself. But I think, to be able to get through what we have for the last 9.5 years and what I have personally with running the business, I attribute the majority of it to just resilience, is just being able to continue to like get back up no matter how many times I get kicked in the teeth. And it's a lot. I mean, it is like, there is no year that has gone by that like there has not been massive mistakes made and massive disappointments and things did not go our way. And things certainly do as well, of course, in order to be
Right.
able to continue to move forward. But it's just that ability to kind of really believe in what I'm doing and be passionate about it and be able to get up every morning and still continue to go like fight that fight, because it is not easy. It does not get easier. The stress mounts. It never becomes what you think it will. Like I think that in the first few years, I always assumed that at X point, then things will feel calmer. They won't be as busy. I won't be as stressed out. And I think as you go, you start to realize that you just kind of have to live in it and really be able to separate, like, this is my work life and it's stressful and hard decisions have to be made, but it doesn't, it is not my entire identity and it does not define me. And I think being able to separate those things of who you are as a human being and who you are as a business owner or executive in any capacity are not necessarily the same, and that's okay.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's just that I tell everybody that wants to start a business, like, you just have to be able to continue to get back up and you just have to continue to move forward no matter what cards you're dealt. I think one of the things I am best at is always having a plan B. Like, no matter what is
Mm.
happening, I can always go, okay, if that supplier can't get that done, then let's problem solve to figure out what our next options are. And usually that'll work. I think entrepreneurship and success in business is maybe 5 and everybody loves what it is that you're doing, and 95% your ability to just keep moving forward.
What would you say if someone was just starting and starting, they have no team, they're solo? What
Yeah.
would be the first hire that you would recommend as a team member?
When we started our company, my business partner and I, it was just the two of us, and we hired one person that essentially could do what we couldn't. I think that that's always the advice I give, is figure out what it is that you can't do and you're not capable of and hire into that,
Hmm.
and try and find somebody that's kind of a jack of all trades, because you need very, very much those people that are generalists and they can do a lot in the beginning. I mean, I think it took us probably 4 or 5 years until we hired people that were very specifically just doing one role, and that
Hmm.
weren't used to wearing a lot of hats. And that takes a very specific type that likes to wear a lot of hats and likes to have their hands on a lot of things. But figuring out what it is that you can't do well. Like, I am great at operations. I'm great at editing. I'm good at problem solving and being able to run a team in the direction that we're running. And my business
Hmm.
partner is the best salesperson and he's an idea person. Neither of us have any creative like juices in our body whatsoever. And so that was the first thing that we hired, was we need somebody that can design, that can do all of our product design, photograph, everything, like anything creative wise, that they kind of plug that hole.
That's smart. And one thing that I learned from, I think it was Tony Robbins, was talking about how time is money. And if you're
Oh yeah.
spending your time doing something that you can hire someone else to do, you are actually making more money by hiring someone than trying to take on that challenge yourself.
100%. And a lot to that though is also having the money to be able to hire somebody. That's usually the hardest
Yeah.
part in like kind of getting off the ground. Cause, we hired, our first hire was this creative person who ended up being our creative director for 4 years. And at that time, I was still running credit cards and shipping every single order myself. And certainly that was not the best use of my time, but we didn't have money to be able to do both. So that was the next hire, was, okay, get the stuff off of my plate that I can pay somebody, on an hourly basis to come in and get done. So I think that those are the two, like, immediately as soon as you can. And obviously it goes unsaid, but like, pay yourself as little as possible and continue to just invest in the business.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think the smartest thing that I did was hire an assistant for
Hmm.
my show. And of course she does a lot of other things, but it's just the simple work that's so time consuming, like reaching
Oh
out to
yeah.
sponsors, making sure that your guests have their Zoom links to get on the
Yeah.
recording, and make sure that everything's lined up accordingly, and make sure that I know what I'm doing for as far as recording, and
Of
kind of have
course.
the bios in front of me and everything that I need. So I think it's really important. And a lot of times, you can find a college student that
Oh,
would
no question.
work for you, or just do an internship. I know that there's women that's been on my show that they have coordinated with the local college for them to earn college credit, and they actually have these students for free. And they earn
Oh yeah.
college credit by doing an internship for them, sometimes right out of their home office, to do what they need done. I don't know. I'd feel kind of funny about somebody working for
I
free.
know we've only done paid internships. I can't let
I
people work
couldn't
for my
either.
internship. It's been a really hard thing. I totally respect people that like have those programs, and that's great. I've actually found, I think our first handful of hires, and we still to this day have a ton of moms working for us that aren't working full days. They're usually working like 8 to 2 while the kids are at school or something of that sort. Because I mean, going back to my point, I think moms are like the ultimate multitaskers and can get stuff done fast.
Oh yes.
And so that's still, I think if you can hire specifically moms that have kids in school, like they are happy to work 10, 15, 20, 25 hours a week, when you're not yet ready for a full-time position.
Right.
And we're scrappy as moms.
I know we are. We can juggle, and sometimes we are a jack of all trades, and we actually can master quite a few of all the trades that we do.
Yeah.
And some moms are more creative than others. And I think, a lot of times I love the fact that I have learned from so many different women and everything that they do. I've learned from you today on the show. So it never fails. Every woman that I have on my show, I take away so many nuggets. It's almost like I feel selfish sometimes because I have gained so much over the last year. Just in the show, I told you I've met women from all over the world in different walks of life that have so much to share that I feel so blessed. I really do.
I totally agree with you.
I feel totally blessed, and I feel blessed to have met you as well.
Oh, well, thank you.
I do.
Well.
I pray that your company continues to do as well that it's doing fabulous, but I pray that it continues to do well. And I know that you will continue to do the e-commerce and the online, because and I know that a lot of people, that's the only way they can shop, because we're busy. We're, we can't always shop like we used to, and just stroll the malls on a Saturday. But I appreciate you. Thank you so much, because you've given us a lot of advice. So I do. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Eva. I really do.
Of course, anytime. Thank you.
Thanks. And guys, you know what? If you're ready to start your own business, just do it. I mean, step out of your comfort zone. Try something that you've never tried before. Your opportunities are waiting for you. And what better time than right now? Right now, start something. If you need motivation, if you need a way to start this business, reach out. Like Eva said, reach out to a mentor. Get on social media. This is like the number one avenue for connection right now is social media. So get out there, reach to someone, find a mentor, and start those dreams. Take that passion and that purpose and monetize it and make your dreams come true. Until next time, I'll be praying for you. Have a blessed week.